Sammy Davis Jr. maintained a storage facility using a false identity. Until his death, he made monthly cash payments. It remained undisturbed in a Burbank warehouse for 30 years. Investigators discovered more than mementos when they eventually opened it. The identity of his real mother was revealed in letters. Recordings of talks that could ruin careers and evidence of the actual events involving Kim Novak in 1958. He kept a record of everything. The truth has finally come to light after 30 years of silence. On December 8, 1925, Sammy Davis Jr. was born in Harlem, New York City. Both of his parents, Elvira Sanchez and Sammy Davis Sr., were in vaudeville. In other words, Sammy was born with a predisposition to show business. However, there was a secret to his tale. Elvira, his mother, was Cuban. Due to anti-Cuban sentiment in America at the time, the family kept that information private. Back then, disclosing such origins may have a negative impact on record sales and public acceptance. Racism and the need to conceal aspects of Sammy's identity influenced his life even as a newborn. His first stage was Harlem, which was teeming with the vitality of the Harlem Renaissance and served as the backdrop for the remainder of his life. At the age of 2, Sammy was already performing with the Will Maston Trio, which was fronted by Will Maston, his father, and a family friend. Toys were used by the majority of toddlers. Across the nation, Sammy performed and danced in theaters. Although it came at a price, the limelight turned into his playground. He had an unusual upbringing. Instead, while other children attended school, he developed his trade and learned how to captivate audiences. Although the continuous touring was taxing, it strengthened him. Additionally, it exposed him to the nasty side of racism in the United States. He felt the pain of being treated differently after seeing the signs that read whites only. He had a burning desire to break down barriers from an early age. Sammy's life changed at the age of 3. His parents divorced. After his father took him into custody, he became even more involved in show business. Will Maston developed into more than just a guide. He took on the role of a godfather, doing everything in his power to protect Sammy. However, no one could provide more protection than that. Sammy witnessed the prejudice experienced by black performers. However, he also learned how to respond gracefully and with skill. And with unrelenting diligence. He was not your typical child, even as a toddler. He was a seasoned pro by this point, touring from city to city and astounding audiences. Sammy first appeared on the big screen in Rufus Jones for President when he was 7 years old. He co-starred with Ethel Waters in a movie that ventured to show a black boy in the White House. Despite its humor, the film has a serious message. The screen was illuminated by Sammy's charisma during a period when black faces were uncommon in Hollywood. His dancing and singing won many over. What was to happen was hinted at in the movie. Sammy was more than just an entertainer. He was powerful. If only for a few minutes, he possessed the unique ability to make people see past the hue of his skin. However, the stage life required sacrifice. Unlike other children, Sammy never attended school. For him, there were no chalkboards, desks, or school bells. He learned from his experiences traveling, reading, meeting new people, and owning stages. He taught himself skills, instruments, and languages that were not available in a classroom. He was as hungry to perform as he was to learn. He demonstrated that greatness isn't always a product of education. Passion, perseverance, and an insatiable curiosity can all contribute to it. Everything changed in 1943. Sammy was drafted into the U.S. military at the age of 18, weighing 120 pounds and standing 5 feet 6 inches. Army. He stepped out of the stage's protection and into a far harsher world. Although the promise of unity was false, he joined one of the first merged units. Racism was rampant in the Army. He was called a slur by the first soldier he encountered. The harsh reality struck him hard. In uniform, his brilliance was meaningless. He battled for his life, dealing with hatred and altercations nearly daily. The purpose of the Army was to develop men. It shattered Sammy's innocence. It was shocking how much abuse he endured. He was abducted by white soldiers once. They ridiculed everything about him by painting him white from head to toe. They deceived him once more into consuming beer that had been tainted with pee. On some evenings, they peed on him. He suffered 3 broken noses, and they weren't finished. Before pushing him onto the platform, they degraded him by making him perform and writing derogatory remarks on his forehead. The brutality never stopped. Intended to crush him, soldiers strapped him to a tree one night in the bitter cold. Like so many other victims of racial fear before him, he stood there defenseless. Although the cold pricked his flesh, the pain was more profound. It was a message to remember your place no matter where you go or what you do. He was not protected by the troops. It turned its head away. That night left a mark on his body and heart that would never go away. Things worsened. He was severely beaten by a bunch of troops during one brutal attack, and he was hospitalized for 3 days. It wasn't a random beating. It was a penalty. However, nobody was held responsible. The army that was meant to bring Americans together allowed hatred to grow. In that hospital bed, Sammy lay, recognizing that he needed to rely on himself to survive. He went to dark places because of the anguish. He considered putting a stop to it all. The burden of hatred, the unending brutality. He nearly broke. However, something drew him back. He discovered his weapon, voice, dancing, and showmanship when he joined the Army's entertainment section. It was undeniable, even by the individuals who detested him. He gained power from their acclaim. In 1951, Sammy Davis Jr. returned from the military prepared to face the world. He wanted to battle for his position in show business after having fought for his nation. That opportunity came to Sunset Boulevard's most glitzy nightclub, Kuras. March 1951 was the month. Sammy opened for Janice Page as a member of the Woolmaston Trio. It was a fantastic night. That same year, however, something amazing occurred following the Academy Awards. Stars including Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Cary Grant, Marilyn Monroe, and Judy Garland were present in the room. They marveled at Sammy's performance, which instantly made him a household name. There was no stopping the buzz. Reservations flooded in. He even received a $20,000 TV pilot from ABC after making an appearance on Eddie Cantor's Colgate Comedy Hour in 1952. For a black performer, it was unprecedented. Sammy had previously made it, but no sponsor supported it. Cr. He became the talk of the town because of Rose. Tragic events occurred in 1954, just 3 years later. Sammy, who was only 29 years old, was traveling from Las Vegas to Los Angeles in his Cadillac on November 19. At a fork in U.S. Route 66, another vehicle backed into his lane. His left eye was struck by the car's horn button during the collision. The harm was irreversible. Doctors were unable to save his eye despite his prompt arrival at the community hospital. He was only there for 9 days. Frank Sinatra and other friends supported him. Show offers poured in at 3 times his previous rate. Sammy initially wore an eye patch before switching to a glass eye. He jokingly referred to himself as a Jewish one-eyed Negro. A lot of people believed his career was over. However, he returned to the stage at Syros 8 weeks later, once again dazzled by Hollywood's best. Sammy's life was altered in yet another way by that accident. He became a Jewish conversion in 1960. He read about the Jews' protracted fight for survival while he was recuperating. He had received a mezuzah from a friend, Eddie Cantor, and discussed religion. Sammy felt a sense of belonging. He said that his thought process had always been Jewish. He felt that being Jewish and black made him stronger, despite the fact that many people made fun of him. He advocated for civil rights and became a symbol of tenacity. Sammy had to deal with harsh bigotry even as his fame increased. He was able to be the star of performances in 1950s Las Vegas, but he was not allowed to stay in the hotels where he played. He was not allowed to eat in the restaurants or enter through the front doors. He wouldn't take it. He insisted on change. He put pressure on casinos with the Rat Pack's assistance. He became the first black entertainer to remain on the frontier, earning $25,000 a week at the Sands by the early 1960s. Official segregation in Las Vegas hotels was finally abolished by 1971. Sammy made it possible. Sammy was not just a vocalist. He was a multi-talented master. He taught himself to play the vibraphone, piano, drums, trumpet, and more. He was able to dance, do impressions, tell jokes, imitate voices, and even pull off gun stunts. There were several surprises in his shows. Since no one else could do it all, he became known as Mr. Show Business. Broadway was blown away by Sammy in 1956. March 22 marked the opening of Mr. Wonderful. It was nearly unheard of for a black star at the time that the show was written specifically for him. Critics detested it. It was described as noisy and mediocre by the New York Times. But the chairs were packed with Sammy's charm. The $225,000 cost of the show was recouped after 383 performances. By incorporating his nightclub act, he even transformed each performance into something unique. He was joined on stage by his father and uncle. Rivera, a juvenile cheetah, was also a member of the cast. Offstage, Sammy had high-profile relationships and threw wild parties. He created history on Broadway. With Golden Boy, Sammy created history once more in 1964. On October 20th, it opened. His role was that of a black boxer who fell in love with a white woman. Outrage erupted when he kissed her on stage. Threats of bombs and death ensued. But Sammy refused to back down. He was nominated for a Tony for his performance. He also marched in Selma alongside Martin Luther King Jr. during this period. Sammy put everything on the line for his convictions. His program made viewers confront harsh realities. Sammy continued beyond the stage. He starred in Ana Lucasta in 1958. The cast was entirely black. They took on difficult problems. He starred alongside Sidney Poitier and Dorothy Dandridge in Porgy and Bess in 1959. He was a star in Bob Fosse's Sweet Charity by 1969. In addition, he joined Robin in The Seven Hoods in 1964 and the Rat Pack in Ocean's 11 in 1960. Black actors in Hollywood now have more opportunities thanks to Sammy. Sammy appeared everywhere on TV. He made appearances on numerous shows, including The Tonight Show and The Ed Sullivan Show. He started the Sammy Davis Jr. in 1966. Broadcast on NBC. He was among the first black performers to appear as the main attraction on a variety show on a primetime network. He was joined by celebrities including Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. He promoted the show by doing hundreds of interviews every week, putting in more effort than anyone else. His fame paved the way for other black performers to get recognition on television. In 1941, Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. became pals. Sammy was just 15. In Detroit, he was playing with the Will Maston Trio. At the age of 26, Frank was on tour with Tommy Dorsey's orchestra. Frank thought he was seeing something unique the moment he saw Sammy on stage. Frank continued to look for methods to assist Sammy during the ensuing 10 years. When Frank performed at the Capitol Theater in New York in 1947, he made sure the Will Maston Trio opened for him. That moment transformed Sammy's life forever and provided him a tremendous break. Frank did more than just open doors. When it really counted, he defended Sammy. Due to his race, Sammy was denied access to the Copacabana in New York in 1950. Frank was enraged. He insisted that Sammy come back the following evening. Sammy was welcomed this time. Frank continued after that. He deliberately refused to perform at venues that did not accept Sammy as an equal, walked in with him, and sat at the same table. Frank's acts were audacious and risky during a period when black entertainers were required to utilize separate entrances and lodgings. When Sammy lost his left eye in an automobile accident in 1954, he almost died. Once more, Frank took over. He took Sammy to Palm Springs to recuperate after paying the hospital fees. Frank did not allow him to feel sorry for himself. He threatened to lose everything if Sammy didn't return to the stage. Sammy was back in front of crowds in a matter of weeks. His bravery was famous. Sammy sought to emulate Frank's style because he was so impressed by him, including his hair's curl. Their friendship served as an example of true loyalty to the globe. Sammy gained the courage to enter the elite circles of Hollywood as a result. The world witnessed that friendship sparkle on the big screen in 1960. On August 3, Ocean's 11 made its debut in Las Vegas. Frank, Dean Martin, Sammy, Joey Bishop, and Peter Lawford were the main actors in the movie. They performed a big theft while playing World War II veterans. The Rat Pack performed live at the Sands and other clubs until morning while filming behind the scenes at night. Josh Howard, a crucial component of the scheme, was portrayed by Sammy. At the box office, the movie brought in $5.5 million, or almost $55 million today. An iconic image was created by that last shot of the Rat Pack passing a casino sign with their names. Sammy was no longer a sidekick. Among the stars was him. Sammy was making up to $25,000 a week in Las Vegas by the late 1950s. However, he was unable to stay in the hotels where he performed, despite packing theaters. He had to remain miles away on the west side due to segregation. Sammy held on to it. At the Frontier, he was the first black entertainer to receive free accommodation and board. In Las Vegas, that aided in removing the color barrier. He persisted in advocating for civil rights demonstrations and going to the Tropicana to buy a steak. Sammy played a part in Nevada's 1971 legislation that outlawed discrimination in hotels. When he passed away in 1990, Las Vegas temporarily turned down its lights. He was suddenly treated like a king by the city that had before spurned him. After Ocean's 11, Sammy made a lasting impression on movies as well. In 1962, he co-starred with the Rat Pack in Sergeants 3. The film brought about $4.3 million. Sammy even donned a cap that John Wayne had given him. He starred in the 1964 movie Robin and the Seven Hoods, which combined comedy, gangster drama, and music. As well, Sammy held his own against Bing Crosby, Dean, and Frank. These movies weren't merely entertaining. They demonstrated Sammy's stardom on his own. He contributed to a shift in Hollywood's perception of black performers. However, Sammy's life was more than just being famous. He fell in love with Kim Novak in 1957. She was a major star in Hollywood. The Steve Allen Show was where they first met. Before long, they were meeting one another's families and enjoying holidays together. However, interracial partnerships were risky back then. Just 4% of Americans thought well of them. People's memories of Emmett Till's lynching were still vivid. Kim and Sammy made an effort to hide things. Sammy hid in automobiles behind blankets. They got together at a Malibu beach house. However, a gossip column made a bogus story that they were engaged in January 1958. Like wildfire, the news spread. Studios went into a panic. The mob became involved. Mobsters connected to Columbia Pictures abducted Sammy. They threatened to take away his remaining sight if he didn't break up with Kim. Sam Giancana, the mob boss, acknowledged that he was unable to keep Sammy safe in Hollywood. Sammy felt frightened. He and Kim split up on January 7, 1958. He had no desire to. There was nothing he could do. He wed Lorraine White, a black vocalist, on January 10, a few days later. To appease the crowd and the media, it was a farce. He gave her as much as $25,000. He attempted to strangle her that night because he was so upset. His aide later discovered him with a gun by himself. In April, the marriage came to an end. Sammy had lost nearly everything as a result of his romance with Kim. It demonstrated how risky it was to question racial norms in 1950s America. There was more to Sammy Davis Jr. and Mae Britt's 1960 marriage than merely a partnership. It directly challenged one of the most repulsive taboos in America. 31 states at the time prohibited interracial marriage. According to a 1958 Gallup poll, only 4% of Americans were in favor of black-white unions. Following violent warnings and bomb threats against the synagogue, the couple's wedding plans at Temple Israel of Hollywood were derailed. They were forced to relocate the event to Davis's house in the Hollywood Hills. As witnesses, Peter Lawford and Frank Sinatra stood next to them. Prior to the wedding, Sammy and May had both become Jews. They rose to prominence as one of the few black Jewish interracial couples. Their bravery came at a high cost. There were swastikas on their land. Brit's 20th Century Fox contract was terminated. Because of his choice of partner, Davis was not invited to President Kennedy's 1961 inauguration. There were challenges associated with raising a family. Tracy, their daughter, was born in 1961. They then adopted Mark and Jeff, 2 kids. The hatred persisted. Racial epithets were inscribed on automobiles. Swastikas were used to deface their house. May and Sammy made an effort to keep their children safe, encircling them with companions who valued skill over race. However, the outer world could be harsh. Later, Tracy admitted that she had moments of feeling secure before being horrified by the bigotry she saw outside of their social circle. It was the end of Brit's career. Despite their divorce, Sammy continued to be involved with his children's life because the studios thought no one wanted to see a white actress married to a black man. He sponsored his son's bar mitzvah and assisted with their Jewish education. Brit filed for divorce in 1968, 8 years into their marriage. She mentioned emotional anguish and severe brutality. Although their issues went deeper, Sammy's affair with singer Lola Falana was the tipping point. There wasn't much time for family because of his constant touring and the pressure of public hatred. Sammy's entire world collapsed following the divorce. He became addicted to booze and drugs. His escape was amyl nitrite and cocaine. Celebrities frequented his raucous party house in Beverly Hills to do drugs and drink. He was dazzling on stage. He was frequently inebriated, intoxicated, and unruly off stage. The distance between his personal suffering and his popularity widened. Sammy wed dancer Alte Viscor in 1970. The officiant was Reverend Jesse Jackson. Only a year before Sammy passed away, in 1989, they adopted a son, Manny. Although Alta Visi provided him with some stability, their lives were everything but peaceful. They were notorious for throwing wild parties at their estate. There were rumors of orgies and wife-swapping. Sammy fought addiction and then throat cancer, but Alta Visi was there for him through it all. She owed more than $7 million in taxes after his death in 1990. She lost the majority of their possessions as well as their house. In stark contrast to their earlier glitz, she struggled with her own drinking problem and lived in poverty. Nevertheless, she organized memorial services and charitable endeavors in an effort to preserve Sammy's memory. Sammy's addiction to gambling contributed to his financial collapse. In his career, he made almost $50 million. He occasionally earned up to $185,000 per night. In his death, however, he owed the IRS more than $7 million. At the tables, he could spend $40,000 in a single night. Sammy had to cover his losses, in contrast to Sinatra, whose debts were frequently forgiven. His problems were exacerbated by dubious tax shelters and bad business dealings. His magnanimity also contributed. He spent considerably more than he could afford and provided for a large number of people. He made his first and only appearance at the top of the charts in June 1972. On the Billboard Hot 100, his rendition of The Candyman peaked at number 1. He received a gold record for it, and more than 2 million copies were sold. This was unexpected because Sammy initially detested the song, but a new generation of admirers were won over by its lovely melody and his charisma. His anthem is I've Gotta Be Me. The 1968 song's theme of enjoying life to the fullest and remaining loyal resonated with Sammy's struggle for self-identity. In addition to experiencing racism and religious discrimination, he also lost his left eye in a vehicle accident in 1954. However, he never allowed these things to shatter him. He frequently used the song to close out performances, transforming each one into a declaration of resistance and optimism. His dominion was Las Vegas. He was making up to $25,000 a week there by the late 1960s. By calling for equal treatment, he contributed to the transformation of the city's racist practices. His performances were stunning fusions of comedy, dance, song, and impressions. His achievements contributed to Las Vegas's rise to prominence as a center of entertainment. As a permanent homage, his image may still be seen on billboards and casino walls. Sammy also broke down barriers on TV. He dominated programs like The Tonight Show and The Ed Sullivan Show in the 1960s and 1970s. One of the first network variety shows presented by a black celebrity was his own 1966 series. Millions of hearts were won by his effortless ability to dance, sing, joke, and imitate. However, his darker side was never far away. His years of occult research led to a worsening of his drinking and drug usage. Friends talked about crazy excess, limitless alcohol, and cocaine-fueled nights. Sammy acknowledged that he was exhausted from trying everything. Addiction and betrayal caused his marriage to collapse with May. He lost his credibility and once abruptly ended a performance after just one song. He eventually stopped using cocaine, but his struggle with drinking persisted. Controlling his demons became more difficult as he immersed himself in his sinister endeavors. And the legendary Mr. Show industry appeared to be in danger of going bankrupt during those years. When Sammy Davis Jr. made the decision to rejoin Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin in 1987, fans everywhere were overjoyed. After years of dreaming, the farewell tour was finally coming to pass. Initially, they dubbed it the International Farewell Tour. It was dubbed the ultimate event once Liza Minnelli joined in. It was the largest tour the Rat Pack had ever done. They stopped performing at tiny nightclubs. They played in enormous arenas that could accommodate anywhere from 10,000 to 25,000 spectators. Nobody has ever witnessed such a daring maneuver. On March 13, 1988, the Oakland Coliseum hosted the first performance. It seemed magical at first, but gradually flaws appeared. The constant travel and late-night gatherings were too much for Dean Martin, who was already 70. He departed after only 5 performances, citing a kidney issue. Despite having to halt the tour, Sinatra and Davis persisted. The show continued after they brought in Minnelli. In January 1989, they concluded the U.S. leg in Miami. They then performed in Europe, Australia, and Japan. Finally, the trip came to a close in May 1989. August 1989 marked the beginning of the actual conflict. Sammy started to lose his taste buds. His throat was constantly hurting. Soon after, doctors broke the devastating news to him. Carcinoma of the throat. He was able to hear because of all those years of smoking, up to 4 packs a day. Sammy had an option. He could try radiotherapy to continue singing, or he might allow surgeons to remove his vocal box to save his life. His voice was his choice. He had treatment for 8 grueling weeks. It appeared to work at first. The tumor contracted. Even though Sammy made a few appearances on stage again, the disease had returned by early 1990. And rapidly spreading. There was no longer any chance of surgery. Sammy's weight decreased to around 60 pounds, and he could hardly speak. His strength, voice, and ultimately his life were taken away by the illness. Sammy Davis Jr. passed away on May 16, 1990, at the age of 64. The very habit that had driven his long nights and never-ending performances stopped his gift to the world. However, the sorrow didn't end there. The truth about Sammy's financial situation was revealed after he passed away at his home in Beverly Hills. He owing almost $5 million in taxes, even though he had earned millions over the course of 6 decades. That debt had increased to $7 million including fines and interest, or around $13 million in today's currency. The IRS confiscated everything from his estate, which was worth about $4 million, to cover the outstanding balance. Altavas, his wife, had to pick up the pieces. She now shared the debt since she co-signed their tax filings. The majority of the $2.7 million she received from the sale of their 11,000 square foot property was used to settle the mortgage. It was not the end of the debts. Sammy still owing $118,000 on a retail center mortgage, $2,000 on tuxedos, and $30,500 on groceries. The IRS received all of his future royalties and insurance. Altavas spent years fighting in court. She lost nearly everything in the process, but by 1997, she had reached a settlement with the IRS. The world was shocked to see one of its brightest stars wane, not only in terms of health but also in terms of wealth. The ensuing auction just made the heartache worse. Over 1,800 people met in Los Angeles in September 1991. They came in order to purchase fragments of Sammy's life. He put more than 500 of his personal belongings up for sale. His Candyman gold record brought $4,270. He earned $11,000 off a pair of his tap shoes. People even purchased his hats, walking sticks, scrapbooks, and jewelry. $439,000 was raised at the auction. That tax bill of $7 million was little affected, as she saw her husband's possessions slip out of her grasp. Even worse, Sammy had already lost some of his belongings. 185 pieces of jewelry and even a painting by Andy Warhol were on the missing list. Then an unexpected turn of events occurred. A 28-year-old guy called Matthias Horancic received an odd bill for $365 in late 1991. He had never rented the storage facility. Someone had taken his ID. After investigating, a One Self-Storage in Burbank discovered that the unit had been rented using false information. The management called the police because he thought it might be concealing something harmful. They discovered something startling when they unlocked the locker. Sammy Davis Jr.'s personal belongings were in there. A jukebox featuring the Candyman, an antique record player, a trumpet, clothes, papers, and pictures were all present. 2 weeks following the sale, someone had rented that apartment in an attempt to conceal the goods. Police discovered that an Alta Visi employee had assisted in hiding the materials. He claimed that he was attempting to preserve what was left because the IRS was pursuing everything. They paid with cash using a stolen ID. Nobody would have known if they had continued to pay. The IRS learned. In an attempt to recoup more of the debt, they confiscated the goods. Altavice claimed not to be aware of it. This secret storage was just one more depressing chapter in a history of brilliance, success, and failure.